As rumors persist that Jodie Whittaker may be ending her time as the Doctor following the end of Series 13, the question is, who should take over? But we're in the unique position of possibly having already met them. Hey there, folks. I wanted to get this out into the world before anything becomes official about Jodie Whittaker leaving or her replacement being announced, because if I wait too long, this will all be moot. So I want to talk about the possibility and arguments that I've heard both for and against the idea of Jo Martin taking up the mantle of the Doctor. Now, we have already actually seen Jo Martin be the Doctor. She got introduced in Fugitive of the Jadoon. Now, we haven't seen a ton of her since then, and also, depending on what actually happens in Series 13, whether or not she shows up there and we get more of an explanation of who she is and how she fits into the Doctor's timeline, well, it may not be a viable option narratively, depending on what else we find out about her. So I accept that going in. And if that is the case, then maybe the conversation, again, might be moot. But I still want to have it anyways, because I think there's some things to be taken into consideration, or at least talked about, for the fairly unique position that we're in right now. So, Jo Martin as the Doctor after Jodie Whittaker. Well, there's a number of things I've seen floated, both for and against that idea. On the one hand, while not everybody loved it, I know I, for one, thought she handled herself wonderfully when she showed up on screen. She commanded the screen. She had so much presence. I even saw a lot of people who weren't that fond of Jodie really take to her and be like, this is kind of what I wish we had more of right now. So I feel like there is a pretty strong show of support from the fandom. I mean, some people didn't like it. Some people don't like absolutely anything going on with Doctor Who right now. And sometimes they have reasons and are willing to explain them at great length for anywhere up to 5 hours. And you know what? I honestly appreciate putting in that kind of effort. Others just wag a finger and go, Chibnall and Jodie bad. And I really have no time for that. But regardless, there was a pretty positive response to her first reveal and introduction. So that feels like a good starting point. It would absolutely feel like a massive waste of potential if we didn't get more of her in some fashion. And at least right now, as things stand, the way that makes the most sense for her to take over is to become the next Doctor. Now, again, narratively, we don't know whether or not that fits. She may be established as a pre-Hartnell Doctor, or she could still feasibly show up as being part of the Series 6B theory. That had been used to cover some of the weird flubs going on in the Two Doctors back when that thing happened. Or, it could be a case that we actually find out she was a later incarnation of the Doctor, but for whatever reason did not know Jodie and didn't recall her, and that might end up being what gets explained. So all these things are still open possibilities. The main thing that I've seen sort of brought to the table as an argument against having her take over is kind of, losing a big part of the fun of the speculation, of the excitement, wondering what a new actor, even after their cast, will look like in the part, how they will perform it. There's going to be kind of a sense of anticlimax if we don't get to have that big reveal announcement, whether it be on a stage or done as a released video like they did with Jodie Whittaker, or however they choose to do it. That will kind of just be a little bit limp if it turns out, it's the person we already met. And I understand some reservations or a sense of loss at not having that. But if I can be completely honest, that strikes me as a fairly superficial reason to not consider her. I mean, this is not me saying that the people who feel this way are superficial and don't care about deeper things, but I'm just saying that that's the kind of thing that is only in the moment anyways. And I'm not saying there's no value in that, But I'm saying as time goes on, what stands is the stories, the episodes of the show itself. The marketing push and the anticipation around a new announcement, while that will linger in your memory, as far as Doctor Who as a cultural and artistic artifact is concerned, it doesn't really matter. And so it strikes me as an odd reason to hold back from trying this out. That said, there may be some ways to kind of have your cake and eat it too. I've seen it floated more than a few places. The idea of giving Jo Martin some sort of spin-off or side series. Now, this actually isn't a completely new suggestion. The same idea got floated in fan communities after we finally got to see Paul McGann on screen again in Night of the Doctor. Obviously, it didn't happen then, and if I'm being completely honest, I don't actually think that's a viable option. That's not to say it's not viable artistically. I mean, in terms of it actually happening with the BBC. I just don't see that being something that they'll do. After the end of Class, there really seems to be no appetite at the BBC for spin-offs of Doctor Who at all. So I just don't think it's realistic. But you know what? That shouldn't kill us talking about the hypothetical. So let's set the viability of whether or not it would actually happen aside and talk about what kind of shape something like that might take if it were to happen. Now, obviously, with people floating the idea of something like a spin-off, the natural inclination would be to do something like Torchwood or Class or the Sarah Jane Adventures and have it running basically concurrently. I mean, maybe not airing literally in the same chunk of time, but like within the same year, having this stuff go on at the same time. Maybe even having it air at the same time. I don't know. But that's one possibility. But that's one that I actually don't think is a good idea. And I said the same thing when I saw people float the idea of Paul McGann getting a concurrent side series. What that does is inherently split the fandom. So if you have Jo Martin, and like narratively, this would be the way they would have to do it if she is, well, not necessarily, but this might be the way they would have to do it if she is established as not being the 14th Doctor, but some sort of earlier incarnation. And so theoretically, the way that would look is Jo Martin gets a side series showing her adventures while whoever the 14th Doctor ends up being moves forward in the main show. But that, like I said, is going to inherently divide the fandom, as now we have, I mean, it's always an argument, who's the best Doctor, but now it's going to get amplified to God knows what levels by having it be, which is the best Doctor right now. And that's an argument that's going to be further fueled by the fact that one of them is in a side series and the other is the main one. Like that is just built to cause fan wars. And I'm not necessarily saying that creators or even the business end should be super concerned about whether or not something's going to tick off fans in terms of getting them arguing with each other. Worrying too much about that is how you get literally nothing done. But at the same time, that really would be something that would divide fans' loyalties in a way that I think would be detrimental to support for Doctor Who as a whole, and also just for the franchise from an artistic standpoint. It inherently puts them as battling against each other, and that's not going to be good for either one if they do that. Alternately, you could have it be something a little bit more like a one-off or even an alternating series with the main one. So you could have it as, say, instead of having them within the same year, 1 year of whoever the 14th Doctor ends up being, 1 year Jo Martin. That still has the potential to have the same overall impact of dividing the fan base, but at least spreading them out so they're not layering on top of each other would remove at least some of that, or at least dampen it a little bit. But I still think that would happen to a certain degree. And if you were to offer something like a miniseries or a special even, like give her the holiday special, and then like whatever, let's say theoretically, Jodie Whittaker regenerates at the end of series 13. Give Jo Martin the holiday special as anticipation to whatever's going to happen next, and maybe even hint at whoever became the 14th Doctor after that in that story, however you want to do it. And then after that, we get series 14 with 14th Doctor. That's not a terrible idea on certain levels, because it would allow for her to have something that is more self-contained and is not built in such a way that inherently puts it at odds with the main show quite as much, depending on how you went about marketing and like making it clear that we're doing this as a one-off, like a 6-episode special series or something like that. But there is a really big problem with doing that has to do with Jo Martin's standing as the Doctor, because it inherently makes her a lesser Doctor. Because no matter what you think about, say, for instance, the War Doctor, he's not going to be the top of anybody's list of best Doctors because he was there so briefly. He's basically there 2 specials and then a bunch of side material. It's honestly the same way with McGann to a certain extent. Unless you are the kind of fan who digs into the novels, the audio dramas, and things like that, you just are never going to have a proper appreciation for that character. Now, that in and of itself isn't the end of the world, except we've got the added layer where if they went that way, if they just gave her a special, well, that would mean that the first Black Doctor ever wasn't treated the same as all the previous Doctors in the main series. She was never even given the chance to truly be the Doctor. Even McGann, while he was kind of had no option to play the part other than in audio for a very, very, very long time, there was still the potential, had the TV movie been more successful, for him to continue in the role. That wasn't ever going to be the case with the War Doctor, but John Hurt, between age and also, how high profile he was, it was never designed to be anything more than that. And also John Hurt, he's just kind of an older, weary Doctor. Okay. The first Black Doctor matters. And to treat that character, the first time they've been Black, as something that is lesser, to treat that character as someone who is worthy of a spin-off, a special, or worst case scenario, no appearances outside whatever storyline is going on with the Timeless Child arc that Chibnall's doing. That inherently frames the Black Doctor, the first Black Doctor, as being lesser. And that, for me, is too big a factor, especially when you combine with the fact that, she was really good. That's too big a factor to have anybody other than her be the 14th Doctor, in my mind. Because that's, frankly, insulting. And it's not really okay. And in case anyone's going to suggest this as a way to countermand it, no, it wouldn't really fix it if you cast someone else to be the 14th Doctor who was also a Black actor. Because you still treated the first one like she wasn't worthy of the kind of treatment and stories and even attempts at longevity that every other main numbered Doctor has been afforded, or at least was planned and hoped to have had. And that's messed up. Any way you slice it, that's messed up. And if you're going to say to me, well, you're just dragging politics into this, well, yeah. Yeah, I am. Because I'd feel the same way if, instead of being the first Black Doctor, if Jo Martin was the first explicitly queer Doctor. Either explicitly non-binary, bisexual, pansexual, lesbian. And yes, I know they've hinted at that with some of the other Doctors, but it's never been explicit up to this point. So if it was that, I know I'd be offended as heck. That it would feel like, oh, here, look, we gave you the queer Doctor and there, you're satisfied. Now we're done. We're not going to do anything with that again. I would be really mad. And it's not any different if it's a Black Doctor. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm bringing politics and I'm bringing representation into this conversation because it's here. Not talking about it doesn't make it suddenly vanish or go away. And if you feel that that is not a good reason to keep her on and have her be the 14th Doctor, well, then I would say the most fair argument that could be made is if that was never going to happen, then maybe Chibnall never should have done this in the first place with her casting, because it comes across as tokenism and stunt casting. And I do not want that for her. She deserves better. She deserves the shot for more than that. And I'm sorry if you would feel deprived of the excitement of guessing and of finding out whether or not you were right in a big presentation, or, a name I've never even heard of, or, this big get, or whatever. I'm sorry. I understand being disappointed by that, but there will be more in future. You'll have that again. We're never going to have the chance to give the first Black Doctor her due ever again. Because doing something like this with a future Black actor, there's certainly no reason to not do that, but you only get one shot at the first time. And throwing it away just is not only a waste, it's unfeeling. It's not right. And I will continue to cross my fingers and hope that whatever happens in Series 13, if Jo Martin appears at all, whatever narrative details we get about her further allows for her to be the 14th Doctor. And honestly, I personally would be willing to allow for the idea that actually she was a previous incarnation of the Doctor, but she's now also going to be the 14th Doctor. The Doctor has borrowed faces before. There isn't a reason the Doctor can borrow their own. And while generally speaking, that is an idea that scares me because it's just going to lead to a campaign of people going, bring back David Tennant, which, look, he had a shot. He was great. He was wonderful, but I don't want the show to start looking back like that. This would strictly be a narrative contrivance because Jo Martin wasn't really the Doctor before. So from a narrative standpoint, it might establish, okay, the Doctor can take the faces that they've had previously, but from an actual viewer perspective, it wouldn't really be that. So I'll allow it. Whereas the idea of bringing back any of the earlier actors to be the new regeneration of the Doctor, but also the old one, I just kind of turn my nose up at and go, no, that's how you get franchises that just are circle jerking around their old glory days instead of trying to be something new. And whatever you think about Chibnall's era, love it, loathe it, it's not being the same thing. And whether you think that's bad or not, in terms of the specific things he's been doing, it is healthy for the state of a franchise that could theoretically go on forever. There is no reason that Doctor Who ever needs to end or ever needs to be rebooted, which I've talked about before. So with that in mind, the worst thing that a franchise like this could do is start to circle back on itself and focus more on what it used to be instead of what it could be in the future. So there you have it. I know I said I was going to entertain arguments for and against. You may have realized by now, I think Jo Martin should be the 14th Doctor. I actually feel that very, very, very strongly. And I'm doing my best to give credence and understanding to the arguments against it. But even if I can understand some of them, I cannot agree with them enough to think that it isn't what should happen. I feel this very strongly. I think Jo Martin should be the 14th Doctor. Will that happen? I don't know. I honestly don't have a ton of faith that it will, but it should. It should be what happens. What are your thoughts on this? Whatever they are, keep them polite, even if you disagree with me. Drop them on down in the comments and let's talk about it. I have a Patreon, and that is how I pay my bills. There are rewards for every tier. You can get access to videos early. You can get your name in the credits. You can get access to a Patreon-exclusive Discord, a lovely, very friendly place I'm very proud to be able to have. But if you're not up for that, there's also YouTube memberships if you want to check out the rewards over there. But if you can't do that either, that's all right. I'm not going to tell you what to do, as strong as my feelings on various things might be. Because at the end of the day, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.